A flawless human skull carved from solid crystal defies all logic. This is the heart of a global mystery that has captivated explorers and scientists for over a century. By the end of this journey, you will know the hidden stories behind 25 of these enigmatic objects, separating documented fact from incredible fiction. Some claim these artifacts hold the wisdom of Atlantis, while others insist they are clever modern fakes. Were they crafted by ancient hands with lost technology, or do they whisper secrets from another world entirely? What does our enduring fascination with these crystal skulls truly reveal about us? That first description perfectly captures the most celebrated artifact in this entire collection. The Mitchell-Hedges skull is the undisputed star of the legend, a masterpiece of milky quartz crystal so perfect it seems to defy its own origins. Its story begins with a dramatic flourish in the 1920s, deep within the humid jungles of Belize. The flamboyant British adventurer Frederick Albert Mitchell-Hedges claimed his teenage daughter, Anna, discovered the skull while exploring the ancient Maya city of Lubuntan. According to the tale, on her 17th birthday, as the sun broke through the canopy, its light glinted off a buried object. What she unearthed was not a mere carving, but a life-sized human skull of breathtaking clarity, complete with a jawbone that detached and moved with a silent, eerie precision. The craftsmanship is what truly stuns observers. It is carved from a single, flawless block of quartz. The jaw is not attached but fits perfectly, and when suspended on delicate crystal pivots, it moves as if speaking. Experts who have examined it note its anatomical correctness, with optical prisms and light channels carved into the base of the cranium, in such a way that light entering the eye sockets can make the entire skull appear to glow from within. For a culture working with stone tools, the precision required to carve something this complex from quartz, one of the hardest minerals on Earth without causing fractures, seems almost supernatural. Mitchell-Hedges himself fueled the mystery, nicknaming it the Skull of Doom and claiming it was used by Mayan high priests in death rituals, capable of focusing a lethal will. Naturally, such a dramatic origin and appearance spawned tales of psychic phenomena. Owners and viewers have reported strange sensations, visions of past lives, feelings of nausea or profound peace, and even claims that the skull stores holographic records of ancient history. Some said it would change temperature on its own, or that cameras malfunctioned in its presence. These stories, repeated in books and documentaries, cemented its reputation as an object of power. Yet the discovery story itself is shrouded in controversy. No one else from the expedition documented the find at the time, and later research suggested Mitchell-Hedges may have actually purchased the skull at a Sotheby's auction in London in 1943. This discrepancy between romantic adventure and mundane receipt is the first major crack in the crystal legend. Scientific analysis added more questions than answers. In the 1970s, tests conducted by Hewlett-Packard's crystal laboratories concluded the skull showed no telltale marks of modern carving tools. They stated it must have been painstakingly shaped using diamonds, then polished with a meticulous rotating slurry of sand and water over a span of perhaps 300 years. This finding seemed to support an ancient origin. However, later examinations by the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institution pointed to subtle tool marks consistent with 19th-century European jewelry-making equipment, specifically rotary wheels. The scientific community remains divided, a split that perfectly mirrors the larger debate. Is the Mitchell-Hedges skull a genuine, inexplicable relic of a lost high technology, or is it an exquisite and inspired fake? A beautiful fiction carved in the modern era to feed our longing for mystery. Its unresolved story set the template for every crystal skull that followed, blending undeniable beauty with unverifiable history. The division in the scientific community only deepened with a landmark study in the 1970s. Anna Mitchell-Hedges, who had inherited the skull, took it to the famous crystal laboratories at the Hewlett-Packard Company. Their engineers were experts in quartz, a material vital for their electronics, and their analysis yielded astonishing conclusions. They confirmed the skull was carved from a single block of pure quartz crystal. More critically, they found it had been sculpted against the natural grain or axis of the crystal. Carving against this axis with primitive tools would have been nearly impossible, as the quartz would have shattered under the stress. The lead engineer famously stated that, even with their modern diamond-tipped tools and advanced knowledge, his team could not replicate it. They theorized its creators must have used a meticulous, years-long process of gentle abrasion, perhaps taking generations to complete. This report was a bombshell, seeming to validate the skull as an artifact of a lost, sophisticated technology. Yet the skeptics had their own powerful evidence. Examinations by institutions like the British Museum focused on the fine surface details. They identified microscopic markings, curved striations that were consistent with the rotary wheels used in 19th-century European lapidary workshops. These tools, powered by foot treadles or early engines, were used by gem cutters and jewelers of the Victorian era. The implication was clear to them. The skull was a masterful piece of art, but a modern one, likely created in the 1800s to feed a growing European fascination with ancient curiosities. This clash of expert opinions left the origin in a perfect, frustrating stalemate. While scientists debated tool marks, a far more colorful narrative was weaving itself around the artifact. Legends bloomed in the absence of definitive answers. Some psychics and channelers claimed the skull was a powerful data storage device, a crystalline computer holding the entire history and wisdom of the lost continent of Atlantis. They said ancient priests, or perhaps even visitors from other stars, used it for healing, for seeing the future, or for communicating across vast distances. These stories transformed the skull from an archaeological puzzle into a talisman of cosmic significance. It became a focal point for New Age beliefs, a symbol of a harmonious, technologically spiritual past. This deep dive reveals the two parallel worlds the skull inhabits, one of measurable science with conflicting data, and another of intangible legend fueled by human longing. The Mitchell-Hedges skull, therefore, is more than an object, it is a mirror. Its flawless surface reflects back our own desires, whether for a forgotten golden age or for rational, empirical truth. While the Mitchell-Hedges skull dazzles with its jungle discovery tale, another artifact offers a far more documented and perhaps more revealing history. The British Museum skull sits in a glass case in London, a life-sized carving from cloudy rock crystal. Its provenance is remarkably clear, tracing back to the French antiquities dealer Eugene Boban in the 1860s. Boban, operating in Mexico City, first sold the skull to an American collector, and it eventually made its way across the Atlantic. This paper trail, rare in this field, anchors the object to a specific time and place, 19th century Mexico, a period rife with a booming market for pre-Columbian artifacts. Physically, it is less refined than its famous counterpart. Under the microscope, researchers have identified straight, parallel grooves on its surface, markings that are the unmistakable signature of a rotary wheel, a tool used by European jewelers and lapidaries. The teeth were carved with a tubular drill, another modern implement. For most mainstream archaeologists, this evidence is conclusive. The British Museum skull is a post-Columbian creation, a skillful forgery made to satisfy the appetites of wealthy collectors and museums eager for exotic treasures from the New World. Yet, to simply label it a fake and move on misses its profound cultural power. This skull, alongside a similar one in Paris also linked to Boban, became the template. It was one of the first crystal skulls to be publicly displayed as a genuine Mesoamerican relic, shaping the entire archetype in the Western imagination. Its image seeped into books, articles, and later, films and television, cementing the idea of the crystal skull as a singular, ancient mystery object. It inspired the stories that would later attach themselves to other skulls, blending fact and fiction into an irresistible legend. So, while science may classify it as a 19th century artifact, its true legacy is as a 20th century icon, a seed from which an entire modern mythology grew. Across the Channel in Paris, another key piece of the puzzle rests in the Musée du Quai Branly. This crystal skull, carved from clear quartz, is slightly smaller than a human head, giving it an almost delicate appearance. Its journey to the museum is a familiar one, once again leading back to the same pivotal figure, the French antiquities dealer Eugene Boban. In the late 19th century, Boban sold this skull to the ethnographer Alphonse Pinot, who later donated it to what would become France's National Museum of Non-European Art. For decades, its label confidently declared it an Aztec masterpiece, a sacred object from the heart of ancient Mexico. This attribution was not unusual, as the Aztecs were known for their exquisite lapidary work in jade and obsidian, making crystals seem a logical, if extraordinarily rare, extension of their skill. The skull sat in its case, a silent, gleaming testament to a mysterious and sophisticated past. Modern science, however, has given this artifact a voice, and what it says challenges everything. Detailed gemological examination revealed microscopic evidence that tells a different story. Experts identified fine, parallel striations on the flat planes of the skull's surface. These are not the random, multidirectional scratches one would expect from hand-held stone tools and abrasive sand. Instead, they are the uniform, curved marks characteristic of a rotary wheel, a tool that spins at a constant speed. This technology, powered by a foot treadle or a small engine, was standard in European jewelry workshops of the 1800s, but it was utterly absent in the pre-Columbian Americas. The precision of the drilling in the teeth and nasal cavity further pointed to metal tools unavailable to Aztec or Maya artisans. The evidence seemed incontrovertible. This was a product of the 19th century, not the 15th. So why does the mystery persist? The question becomes not just about the object itself, but about the moment of its creation. The 19th century was a golden age of archaeology and a booming market for antiquities. Museums and private collectors across Europe and America were eager to acquire exotic treasures from ancient civilizations. This demand created a powerful incentive. Were dealers like Boban simply manufacturing clever fakes to satisfy a hungry market, passing off beautiful modern carvings as rediscovered relics, or is there a more complex possibility? Some researchers suggest these crystal skulls may have been inspired by genuine, but far more crude, ancient artifacts. Perhaps a few small, weathered crystal skulls or skull-like figures did exist in Mesoamerica, serving as cult objects or symbols of death and rebirth. European artisans, upon seeing these, might have then created their own refined, perfected versions, extrapolating a grander tradition from a seed of truth. The Paris skull, therefore, sits at the very heart of the academic debate. It is a beautiful object born from a documented historical context, yet it wears the costume of a much older world. It forces us to ask whether a forgery can still hold power, not as a relic of the Aztecs, but as a relic of our own enduring fascination with the past and our timeless desire to hold a piece of its enigma in our hands. The Paris skull story of 19th century creation finds a powerful echo in a much more recent and much heavier arrival. In 1992, a plain brown package arrived at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. Inside, cushioned in cotton, was an enormous skull carved from milky quartz crystal. It weighed over 30 pounds, stood nearly 10 inches high, and was accompanied by a brief typed note. The note claimed the skull was of Aztec origin, purchased in Mexico City in 1960. The donor remained anonymous, simply signing the letter as a person seeking the truth. This was not a delicate artifact from a bygone era of collecting. It was a modern mystery delivered to the doorstep of modern science. The Smithsonian, one of the world's foremost research institutions, now had a puzzle to solve, and it approached the task with every tool at its disposal. The sheer size of the skull made it an imposing object, but its true weight would be measured in evidence, not pounds. Curators and materials scientists subjected it to a battery of non-invasive tests. They used scanning electron microscopy, a powerful technique that can magnify surface details thousands of times, to examine the carving marks invisible to the naked eye. What they found was definitive. The entire surface of the skull was covered in the crisp, parallel grooves and perfectly symmetrical drill holes that could only be made by high-speed, diamond-coated rotary tools, equipment that did not exist before the 20th century. There was no ambiguity, no room for debate among the experts. The Smithsonian skull was a modern fabrication, likely carved sometime in the mid to late 1900s. This case became a landmark example of how a major institution handles a controversial donation. Instead of hiding it away in a storage vault out of embarrassment, the Smithsonian made a deliberate and educational choice. They put the skull on public display not as an Aztec relic but as a masterful fake. Its label tells the full story, explaining how science unmasked its true origin. In doing so, the museum transformed the object's purpose. It is no longer a question mark from the past, it is a teaching tool for the present. It educates visitors about the sophisticated methods used to create forgeries, the importance of rigorous analysis, and the powerful, often lucrative, allure of archaeological myth. The skull's journey from an anonymous package to a museum exhibit speaks volumes about our relationship with these objects. Even when science provides a clear and conclusive answer, the myth does not simply vanish. The skull retains a haunting presence, a beautiful lie that still draws crowds and sparks imagination. It proves that an artifact's power is not solely derived from its authenticity, but from the story we choose to tell about it and the lessons we are willing to learn. But quartz is not the only crystal whispering these ancient secrets. Deep within the spectrum of this mystery lies a burst of royal purple, the amethyst skulls. These are not the clear, ghostly visages of their quartz cousins, but objects of stunning, opaque color. One prominent example, often affectionately called Ami by those who work with it, is a life-sized carving from a single block of deep violet amethyst. Its provenance is typically traced to vague origins in Central America, with stories suggesting it was uncovered in a forgotten tomb or a remote cave, though these tales lack the specific documentation of a museum acquisition. This very vagueness, however, has made it a perfect canvas for modern belief. Within metaphysical and New Age communities, Ami and skulls like it are revered not as archaeological artifacts but as powerful spiritual tools. Amethyst itself is historically associated with peace, protection, and higher consciousness. When shaped into the form of a skull, a symbol of mortality and transformation, believers feel it creates a unique conduit. They describe it as holding an exceptionally high vibrational energy, capable of facilitating deep meditation, psychic awakening, emotional healing, and communication with other realms. In this worldview, the skull is not a relic to be studied, but a companion to be experienced, its value measured in personal transformation rather than carbon dating. This spiritual narrative exists in stark contrast to the physical realities of the object itself. Large, flawless blocks of amethyst suitable for such a carving are extraordinarily rare in nature. Amethyst is a variety of quartz, but its crystalline structure and inclusions make it more prone to fracturing during carving than clear rock crystal. To sculpt a detailed, hollowed-out human skull from such a temperamental material would require immense skill and patience, whether done by ancient hands or modern ones. The technical challenge is monumental. This duality forces a compelling question: is Ami a genuine artifact of a culture that valued amethyst for its beauty and supposed power, patiently shaped over generations? Or is it a masterful 20th century creation, expertly carved to meet the burgeoning demand of a spiritual market hungry for symbols of ancient wisdom. The color purple, long linked to royalty and the divine, adds a profound new layer of intrigue. It transforms the skull from a symbol of death into a promise of transcendence, proving that the true power of these objects may always lie less in where they came from and more in what we dare to believe they can help us become. The amethyst skull's promise of spiritual transcendence finds a softer, gentler echo in the delicate blush of rose quartz. A skull carved from this stone carries an immediate and profound contradiction, merging the universal symbol of mortality with the crystal most associated with unconditional love and emotional healing. One particularly noted example, often simply called the rose quartz skull, possesses a serene, almost feminine beauty, its cloudy pink surface seeming to hold a warm inner light. Proponents of its ancient origins weave tales that are less about psychic power and more about profound empathy, suggesting it was used by priestesses or healers in sacred ceremonies to mend broken hearts, soothe grief, and restore emotional balance after trauma or loss. The narrative imagines it not as a tool of will, but as an instrument of compassion, its very presence meant to radiate a calming, nurturing frequency. Yet the physical reality of rose quartz presents a significant challenge to such stories. Unlike clear rock crystal, high-quality rose quartz is notoriously difficult to work with on a large scale. It is almost always heavily included with microscopic rutile needles or other minerals, creating internal fractures and a granular, brittle structure. Carving a large, hollow, and detailed object like a human skull from this material without it shattering would be a feat of extraordinary luck or skill, requiring a deep understanding of the stone's internal flaws. This inherent fragility leads many experts in lapidary arts to a different conclusion. They propose that most rose quartz skulls are likely modern creations, carved in the late 20th or early 21st century by skilled artisans who were inspired by the burgeoning legends of the older crystal skulls. These artists would have selected the best available material and used modern stabilizing techniques and tools to carefully realize their vision. This possibility does not diminish the skull's significance, it simply reframes its origin story. In this light, the rose quartz skull becomes a powerful example of how ancient symbols are continuously reinvented for contemporary needs. It sits at the perfect intersection of archaeological mystery and the modern wellness movement. For those who use it in meditation or energy work, its value is not contingent on a carbon date, but on its intentionality, its color, and its form. It represents a conscious blending of an old, enigmatic template with a specific, desired energetic purpose to foster love, forgiveness, and inner peace. Whether a rediscovered relic or a newly crafted talisman, its enduring power lies in its ability to channel a very human longing, the hope that even our deepest wounds can, in time, be healed. The lush, vine-choked ruins of Lubontan in Belize are forever entangled with the crystal skull legend. This specific site, whose name translates to place of fallen stones, is a late classic Maya ceremonial center known for its distinctive architecture built without mortar. It is here, according to the most famous story, that Anna Mitchell Hedges unearthed the flawless quartz skull. But whispers persist of another, a separate artifact often called the Mayan skull of Lubontan. Some accounts from later decades suggest that not one, but several crystal objects were discovered during that 1920s expedition, including smaller skulls or crystalline figurines. These claims typically come from individuals tangentially connected to the original team or from later explorers drawn to the site by the burgeoning myth. One such story tells of a second, slightly smaller skull of smoky quartz found in a nearby temple chamber, while another speaks of crystal masks and carved animal forms. These tales create a compelling image, a hidden cache of crystalline wisdom left behind by the Maya. To evaluate them, we must look at Lubontan itself. Archaeologically, the site is fascinating, but it presents a problem for the skull narratives. Lubonton was primarily a center for ceremony and astronomy, not a major city for lapidary arts. While the Maya were master carvers in jade and obsidian, producing intricate beads, pendants, and mosaics, no evidence of them working large, solid quartz crystal has ever been found at any Maya site. No workshops with crystal debris, no tools capable of such precision, and certainly no other life-sized crystal skulls have emerged from legitimate, documented excavations. The material culture of the Maya, rich as it is, simply does not include this kind of object. This stark absence in the archaeological record forces a difficult question. If the Maya at Lubonton did not make these skulls, who did, and how did they get there? The later stories of multiple finds seem to follow a pattern common in myth-making, where one extraordinary tale generates others, expanding the mystery to fill the available space of our imagination. Each new account adds layers, making the original story feel more grand and historically dense, even as it becomes less verifiable. The significance of the Lubonton skull stories, therefore, may not lie in what they reveal about the Maya, but in what they reveal about us. They demonstrate how a single, potent artifact, real or imagined, can cast a long shadow, inspiring others to see connections and discoveries where perhaps there are none. It transforms a specific location from an archaeological site into a legendary font of mystery, where every stone might hide a glint of crystal, and every whisper might hold a fragment of a forgotten truth. Far from the sterile glass of museum cases, some skulls live in the living rooms of private collectors, where their stories are written not in academic papers but in personal experience. In Texas, there is a skull known simply as Max, a substantial carving from clear quartz with a history as fluid as the light that passes through it. Its modern tale begins with a reported journey from a Guatemalan shaman in the early 1900s, passed to a series of owners who each added to its legend. Unlike artifacts bound by institutional analysis, Max exists in a realm where proof is personal, measured in goosebumps, visions, and a sense of profound connection. This skull has not been locked away for study. It has been shared, displayed at metaphysical fairs and New Age gatherings, where thousands have lined up for a chance to sit quietly in its presence. The accounts from these encounters are remarkably consistent. People describe feeling a tangible energy field, a vibration in the air, or a sudden warmth emanating from the crystal. Some report seeing colors or geometric patterns with their eyes closed. Others speak of a deep emotional release, or a flood of intuitive thoughts that feel alien to their own. In more structured settings, practitioners have used Max as a focal point for channeling, claiming the skull acts as an amplifier or a translator, making communication with non-physical entities or past consciousness clearer and stronger. These first-hand testimonies form a compelling body of evidence, but of a very different kind. They are not data points for a spectrometer, they are narratives of human experience. For the skeptics, this is easily explained as the power of suggestion, a placebo effect magnified by a mystical setting and a pre-existing belief in the object's power. The mind, expecting a profound encounter, can often manufacture one. Yet, for those who have felt something shift in that quiet room, no scientific dismissal can erase the personal truth of the moment. Max represents a vital fork in the road of this mystery. Its significance is not determined by its origin in an ancient workshop, but by its ongoing impact in the modern world. It asks us to consider whether an object's true power can be cultural and psychological rather than archaeological. When a privately held skull draws crowds and inspires deep reverence, it becomes a modern artifact in its own right, a focal point for contemporary spiritual seeking. Its story is still being written, not by the hands that carved it, but by the hearts and minds of all those who approach it, hoping to touch a piece of the inexplicable. The private world of crystal skulls is not limited to personal meditation. It also includes bold attempts at scientific, or perhaps para-scientific, experimentation. One of the most famous skulls in this realm is Shah-Na-Ra, a slightly smaller, clear quartz carving with a story that begins not with a shovel but with a vision. Its modern owner, a researcher named Nick Nosrino, claimed the skull was discovered in Mexico in the 1990s through a method called psychometry. This is the practice of holding an object to receive impressions about its history, a form of intuitive archaeology. According to Nosrino, he was led to a specific burial site by psychic information, and there Shah-Na-Ra was unearthed. This unconventional origin story immediately places the skull outside the boundaries of traditional archaeology, in a space where intuition guides the search for physical evidence. Nosrino, deeply fascinated by these objects, founded the Society of Crystal Skulls International, an organization dedicated to studying their mysteries through both conventional and unconventional means. Shah-Na-Ra became a central figure in this research, subjected to a series of unique experiments. The core claim surrounding it, and others like it, is that crystal skulls can act as transmitters and receivers of information, much like a crystalline radio or a biological hard drive. Proponents suggest the quartz structure can record thoughts, emotions, and events, storing this data in a way that a sensitive individual can later access. In more elaborate tests, researchers attempted to use Shah-Na-Ra as a communication device between other skulls. In one often cited experiment, different skulls were placed in separate, shielded rooms, with the idea that information mentally projected into one skull could be received and interpreted by a psychic working with another. The reported results were predictably ambiguous and subjective, relying on the consistency of the impressions received by the human participants. For mainstream science, these methods lack the controlled variables and repeatable data required for validation. Yet, for those within the community, they represent a legitimate frontier of inquiry. Shah-Na-Ra, therefore, stands at a fascinating and contentious intersection. It represents the full embrace of psychic archaeology, a field where dowsing rods and intuitive flashes are as valid as trowels and carbon dating. Its story challenges the very framework we use to understand the past, asking whether some truths are accessible only through channels that science has yet to or may never quantify. This skull embodies the belief that the greatest mysteries are not just buried in the earth, but are also encoded in the silent lattice of crystal, waiting for the right mind or the right method to tune in and listen. The transition from psychic archaeology to the vaults of organized religion is a stark one, yet the legends insist a crystal skull made that very journey. The story of the Jesuit skull is a tale whispered in the shadows of colonial history, involving one of the most powerful and scholarly orders of the Catholic Church. According to this persistent rumor, during the 17th or 18th century, Jesuit missionaries working in remote regions of South America, perhaps in Brazil or Paraguay, encountered indigenous peoples who possessed a life-sized crystal skull. Recognizing it as a potent spiritual object, an idol of great significance to the native cosmology, the priests allegedly acquired it, possibly as part of their efforts to convert local populations and suppress pagan practices. The narrative suggests that, understanding its extraordinary nature, they eventually sent this enigmatic artifact back to Rome, to the heart of the Jesuit order, and perhaps even into the labyrinthine archives of the Vatican itself. This is a tantalizing premise, as it provides a plausible, centuries-old conduit for an artifact to travel from the heart of the Americas to the heart of Europe, long before the 19th century antiquities market even existed. To investigate, we must look at the historical role of the Jesuits. The Society of Jesus was deeply involved in the colonial project, not just as evangelists but as educators, scientists, and chroniclers. They established vast networks of missions or reductions and were keen observers and collectors of natural history and cultural artifacts. Their detailed reports and carefully assembled cabinets of curiosity were famous. It is entirely within character that a Jesuit priest, upon encountering such a breathtaking object, would have been fascinated both theologically and scientifically. He might have seen it as a demonic idol to be confiscated, or as a marvel of natural philosophy to be studied. The idea that such an item could have entered a Jesuit collection and from there been shipped to a central repository in Europe is historically credible. The central, haunting question, however, is whether it actually did. The trail goes cold at the gates of the Vatican. The Vatican's archives and storerooms are among the most extensive and secretive in the world, holding millennia of accumulated documents, art, and artifacts. While the archives have opened certain historical documents to scholars in recent decades, its vast collections of objects remain largely inaccessible to outside researchers. There is no public inventory, no photograph, and no definitive statement from the Vatican confirming or denying the existence of a crystal skull within its walls. This absence of evidence is the fuel for the legend. In the world of mystery, a closed door is often more compelling than an open one. The silence from Rome allows the story to breathe and grow, suggesting a deliberate concealment of a truth too strange or too powerful to reveal. The Jesuit skull story, therefore, adds a profound new dimension to the crystal skull enigma. It intertwines the mystery with the forces of colonialism, religious conversion, and institutional secrecy. It moves the object from the realm of archaeology and into the realm of ecclesiastical history, suggesting that its power was recognized not just by ancient priests or modern psychics, but by one of the most disciplined and intellectual orders of the Catholic Church. Whether this skull exists today in a locked crate in a Vatican basement, or whether it is merely a phantom born from rumor and the human love for a good secret, its story forces us to consider a chilling possibility. What if the truth about these objects was discovered, understood, and then deliberately hidden away centuries ago by people who believed some mysteries are best left untouched? The silence of the Vatican vaults gives way to the vibrant, sun-baked highlands of southern Mexico. In the state of Oaxaca, another skull emerges from the historical record, one with a more tangible, if still debated, connection to the land. Known in older catalogues as the Oaxacan skull, this artifact is often presented as a potential bridge between legend and documented history. Unlike the flawless perfection of the Mitchell-Hedges skull, the Oaxacan specimen typically shows a different character. It is often carved from a slightly cloudier quartz or rock crystal, and its features can be more stylized, less rigidly anatomical. The cheekbones may be more pronounced, the eye sockets perhaps a different shape, bearing what some experts suggest are the subtle hallmarks of the region's great pre-Columbian civilizations. Oaxaca was the heartland of both the Zapotec and later the Mixtec peoples, master artisans renowned for their breathtaking work in jade, obsidian, and occasionally crystal. They created intricate mosaics, finely carved pectorals, and delicate beads that displayed an extraordinary understanding of hardstone carving. When we place a purported Oaxacan crystal skull next to a verified Zapotec jade mask or a Mixtec crystal ornament, we begin a fascinating comparison. The quality of the polish on genuine artifacts is often sublime, achieved through generations of patient technique. The question becomes whether the skull's craftsmanship matches that ancient standard. In some cases, observers note a similarity in the serene, simplified facial planes, a stylistic choice seen in some Mesoamerican sculpture. Yet the leap from small, solid pendants to a large, hollowed-out human skull is a monumental one. No archaeologist has ever uncovered a workshop in Oaxaca or anywhere else in the Americas that shows evidence of producing objects of this scale and complexity from solid quartz. This glaring absence in the archaeological record casts a long shadow over any claim of great antiquity. However, Oaxaca offers another, equally compelling narrative. The region is not just an archaeological treasure trove, it is a living center of traditional lapidary arts. For centuries, skilled indigenous artisans have passed down techniques for working stone, using hand-powered tools and natural abrasives. To this day, families in towns like Teotitlán del Valle work with local materials, creating beautiful objects that honor their heritage. This enduring tradition opens a profound possibility. Could some of the crystal skulls attributed to Oaxaca, rather than being relics of the classic period, actually be exquisite examples of colonial or even 19th century indigenous craftsmanship? Imagine a master carver, heir to ancient Zapotec knowledge, presented with a magnificent block of clear quartz by a Spanish collector or a modern entrepreneur. Using the very same methods his ancestors used on jade, he might spend a year or more patiently shaping it into the form of a skull, an object that held deep symbolic meaning in both European and Mesoamerican minds. The result would be an artifact of stunning beauty and technical skill, deeply rooted in Oaxacan tradition, yet created in a more recent era. This perspective does not diminish the skull's significance, it transforms it. It becomes a testament not to a lost super technology, but to the resilience and brilliance of living cultural artistry. The Oaxacan skull, therefore, poses a delicate and beautiful question. Are we looking at a message from the deep past, or a masterpiece from a living lineage that has never truly broken its connection to the stone? The highlands of Oaxaca are not the only mountains said to guard a crystal skull. Far across the world, the thin air of the Himalayas holds its own whispers. Legends persist of a crystal skull kept within the silent, incense-filled halls of a remote Tibetan monastery. According to these stories, passed along by travelers and spiritual seekers, this skull is not an object of the dead, but a tool for the living, used by high lamas for deep meditation, spiritual guidance, and even glimpses of prophecy. Its purported purpose is one of clarity and insight, a crystalline focus for minds trained in disciplines that seek to perceive the true nature of reality. To understand how a crystal skull could fit into such a setting, we must look at Tibetan Buddhist ritual art, which already holds a profound and complex relationship with the human skull. In sacred ceremonies, lamas often use a ritual object called a kapala. This is a cup or bowl meticulously crafted from the dome of a human cranium, often adorned with elaborate silver and gemstone settings. The kapala is a powerful symbol not of morbidity but of transcendence. It represents the impermanence of the physical body and the victory of wisdom over illusion. It is used in symbolic offerings during highest yoga tantra practices, a reminder that enlightenment requires confronting and transforming our deepest attachments. So, within this existing framework, the concept of a crystal skull becomes fascinatingly plausible. If a skull made of bone can be a vessel for sacred intention, then a skull made of pure, clear crystal, a material symbolizing purity and the mind's luminous nature, could be seen as an even more potent and refined instrument. It would be a kapala of a higher order, a perfect vessel free from the stains of mortality. Yet, verifying the existence of such an artifact is a task shrouded in mist. Tibet's profound political and cultural isolation for much of the 20th century makes first-hand investigation by outsiders nearly impossible. Monasteries guard their treasures closely, and many sacred objects were hidden or lost during periods of upheaval. Accounts of the skull come second or third hand from visitors who may have seen it briefly, or from stories told by monks who themselves heard it from their teachers. There are no photographs, no museum accession numbers, no scientific papers. Its reality exists in the realm of oral tradition and faith. This very elusiveness, however, is what gives the Tibetan skull its profound weight in the larger mystery. If it is real, it shatters the assumption that crystal skulls are solely a New World phenomenon. It suggests the haunting possibility of a disconnected, global tradition. Imagine ancient cultures separated by vast oceans and impassable mountain ranges, each independently arriving at the same profound idea. to shape the world's hardest, clearest substance into the universal form of a human head. What common thread in the human psyche, or what shared glimpse of an unseen truth, could possibly inspire such a specific and technically daunting creation in both the jungles of Central America and the roof of the world? The Tibetan claim expands the enigma from an archaeological puzzle into a question about human consciousness itself. This idea of a universal archetype finds its most profound test in the vast, sun-bleached landscapes of Australia. Among the whispers of global skulls, one of the most compelling and complex stories is that of an Australian Aboriginal crystal skull, sometimes referred to as the skull of the Dreamtime. To even approach this concept, we must first step into a world view entirely different from our own. The Dreamtime, or Tijukurpa, is not a distant past but a continuous, living reality for Aboriginal peoples. It is the foundational period when ancestral beings shaped the land, created all life, and established the laws, ceremonies, and connections that bind everything together. Within this cosmology, certain stones and crystals are not mere objects. They are living embodiments of ancestral power, known as story stones or sacred increase stones. These are not carved but are natural formations revered for their shape, their location, or the way they capture light, each one a tangible node in a vast spiritual geography. So when we hear a story about a crystal skull within this context, we must ask a very careful question. Is this a genuine, centuries-old oral history about a specific, skull-shaped crystal of immense dreaming significance? Or is it a modern story where the powerful global image of the carved crystal skull has been layered onto or incorporated into Aboriginal lore by outsiders or in recent times? The geological possibility is certainly there. Australia is rich in mineral deposits, and large, high-quality quartz crystals can be found in certain regions. A naturally formed cluster of crystals that even vaguely resembled a skull could easily become a sacred site, a place of ceremony and dreaming tracks. The cultural context, however, is the critical divider. Aboriginal sacred art is overwhelmingly non-figurative for deeply spiritual reasons. It consists of patterns, dots, lines, and symbols that map country and story. The deliberate, representational carving of a human skull from a sacred stone would be an extraordinary departure from this entire artistic and ceremonial tradition. There is no evidence of such a practice in the archaeological or anthropological record. This stark absence suggests that most tales of a specifically carved Aboriginal crystal skull are likely a modern fusion. They represent the powerful crystal skull meme, born from Mesoamerican mystery and amplified by Western popular culture, being projected onto another ancient and spiritually rich tradition. It becomes a kind of cultural echo where a compelling modern legend seeks validation by attaching itself to an even older one. Yet, this doesn't invalidate the deeper truth the story points toward. The real skull of the Dreamtime may not be a carved artifact at all. It could be a specific, uncarved quartz formation known only to certain custodians, a natural marvel that holds the essence of an ancestor. Its power would come entirely from its place in the land and its role in the story, not from any human craftsmanship. This distinction is everything. It challenges the very core of the global mystery. Are we searching for objects made by human hands, or are we recognizing a primordial human instinct to see our own reflection, our own mortality and consciousness, mirrored in the Earth's most perfect stones? The Australian story, whether ancient or modern, pushes the boundaries of the phenomenon from archaeology into the realm of pure symbolism. It asks if the true archetype is not the carved skull, but the moment when a human, anywhere in the world, looks into the face of the earth and for a fleeting instant sees themselves staring back. The serene symbolism of natural stones gives way to a form that is distinctly, unsettlingly other. Among the private collections of crystal skull enthusiasts, one artifact stands out not for its beauty, but for its bizarre anatomy. Known informally as the ET skull, it is carved from a dark, translucent, smoky quartz. Its features are a radical departure from every other skull we have seen. The cranium is massively enlarged, a pronounced sloping dome that bulges backwards, while the face is narrow and delicate, with slanted, oversized eye sockets and a barely there suggestion of a nose and mouth. The overall impression is less human and more reminiscent of the large-headed, slender-faced gray aliens that dominate modern pop culture. Its reported discovery in Central America in the early 1900s places it in the familiar geographical cradle of the legend, but its form launches it into an entirely different cosmic debate. To understand why, we must compare its morphology side by side with a normal human skull. A human cranium, while variable, maintains specific proportional relationships. The ET skull shatters these norms. The volume of its cranial vault is exaggerated to a degree not seen in any human deformity or cultural stylization. Its facial structure is so reduced it seems almost vestigial, as if the being it represents prioritized brain over physical sensation. This is not the artistic shorthand of a Maya or Aztec carver, who might emphasize a skull's teeth or cheekbones for symbolic effect. This is a deliberate blueprint of something fundamentally non-human. Proponents of ancient astronaut theories point to this skull as potential physical evidence. They argue that such a specific, consistent form mirroring the alien gray archetype could not have been invented by a pre-industrial culture without a real-life reference. The question they pose is provocative. Could this skull be a portrait, a meticulous representation carved by an ancient artisan who had witnessed or been told of an encounter with beings from beyond our world? The speculation deepens when we examine the material itself. Some claims suggest that under extreme magnification, the smoky quartz of the ET skull reveals anomalies. Microscopic lines or inclusions within the crystal lattice are interpreted not as natural flaws, but as artificial inscriptions, tiny circuitry, or encoded patterns. The idea is that the skull is not just a sculpture, but a device, its very molecular structure engineered with a technology we can barely perceive. Mainstream geology offers a far more terrestrial explanation. Smoky quartz gets its color from natural radiation altering the crystal's structure over millennia. Inclusions, fractures, and phantom growth lines are common and form through purely geological processes. What looks like a microscopic circuit to an eager eye is often just the breathtaking, chaotic artistry of the Earth itself. Furthermore, the skull's alien morphology is its own greatest liability as an ancient artifact. If it were a genuine pre-Columbian object, its radical design would be utterly unique, with no other examples in any other artistic medium from those cultures. No pottery, no wall carvings, no stone stelae depict beings with this specific physiology. It exists in a vacuum. This isolation leads many experts to a different conclusion, that the ET skull is a modern creation, likely from the mid-20th century. Its design perfectly mirrors the extraterrestrial imagery that began flooding global consciousness after the Roswell incident in 1947 and through the flying saucer craze of the 1950s. It is less a relic of ancient contact and more a fascinating artifact of 20th century ufology, a physical embodiment of the era's growing fascination with visitors from the stars. Whether a clever hoax inspired by science fiction or a genuine mystery object, its power is undeniable. It forces us to confront the deepest question at the heart of all these skulls. What are we really looking for when we gaze into their crystalline faces? Are we seeking our own ancestors, or are we, perhaps, searching for our cosmic cousins? Fluorite introduces a spectrum of soft color to this gallery of crystalline faces. Known as the most colorful mineral in the world, fluorite forms in stunning bands of violet, emerald green, sky blue, and honey yellow, often layered within a single stone like geological pages. A skull carved from this material is a strikingly different object, its translucent hues giving it a dreamlike, almost aqueous quality compared to the stark clarity of quartz. But this beauty comes with a fundamental fragility. Fluorite is significantly softer than quartz, rating only a 4 on the Mohs hardness scale. To put that in perspective, a steel knife can scratch it. This softness, combined with fluorite's perfect cleavage, meaning it tends to split along defined planes, makes it a notoriously difficult stone to carve without it fracturing or shattering outright. The very existence of a detailed, hollowed-out fluorite skull speaks to a carver's immense patience and a deep understanding of the stone's internal structure. This technical reality leads most experts to a clear conclusion. Given the extreme difficulty of the work and the high likelihood of catastrophic failure, large, intricate fluorite skulls are almost certainly modern creations. They are products of a time when advanced stabilizing techniques, precision tools, and a commercial market for such objects all converged. Their emergence aligns perfectly with the late 20th century boom in crystal healing and metaphysical spirituality, where specific stones are prized for their purported energetic signatures. In this worldview, fluorite is celebrated as the ultimate stone of mental clarity and orderly thinking. It is called a mental vacuum cleaner, believed to absorb and neutralize mental chaos, electromagnetic pollution, and negative energy. Its bands of color are thought to align and cleanse the chakras, bringing emotional equilibrium. When shaped into a skull, these properties are believed to be focused into a tool for compassionate understanding. This so-called compassion skull is envisioned not for psychic channeling or doom, but for healing emotional wounds, dissolving anxiety, and bringing lucid focus to confused thoughts. It represents a gentler, more therapeutic branch of the crystal skull mythology. The proliferation of fluorite skulls, alongside those of rose quartz and amethyst, marks a fascinating evolution. It shows how the core template, the skull form, has been adapted to meet the specific desires of a modern spiritual marketplace. We are no longer looking for one mysterious relic, but for an entire pharmacy of crystalline tools, each with a specialized purpose. This artistic and commercial expansion proves that the power of these objects is not locked in their antiquity. It is a living, growing phenomenon, continuously reshaped by what we need to believe they can help us feel, understand, and ultimately heal. This leap from extraterrestrial visitors to a sunken continent reveals how the skulls serve as blank screens for our grandest historical fantasies. The so-called Atlantean skull is perhaps the purest expression of this, an artifact untethered from geography and grafted directly onto the world's most enduring lost civilization myth. The idea that crystal skulls could be relics of Atlantis did not emerge from a dig site, but from the pages of 19th century occult literature. The foundational text is Helena Blavatsky's 1888 work, The Secret Doctrine, where she describes a highly advanced prehistoric humanity that used crystalline devices for communication and energy. While she did not specifically mention skulls, her portrayal of Atlanteans mastering crystalline technology planted a potent seed. This seed was later watered by the famous American psychic Edgar Cayce in the early 20th century. In hundreds of readings, Cayce described Atlantis as a technologically sophisticated civilization that used crystals for immense power generation, healing, and spiritual purposes. He specifically stated that records of this lost knowledge were stored in Hall of Records in various locations, including one in the Yucatan, and that these records would be rediscovered. For many, crystal skulls perfectly fit Cayce's description, physical data storage devices from a forgotten golden age. Specific skulls, like one known as Synergy or another called the Atlantean Record Keeper, are identified not by their excavation reports, but by the intuitive impressions of psychics and channelers who claim to sense an ancient, oceanic energy emanating from them. These readings often describe the skull as having been created in Atlantis, used in its temples, and then carefully transported to the Americas for safekeeping before the Great Cataclysm. The skull becomes a tangible character in an epic prehistoric drama. This narrative is irresistibly compelling because it solves multiple mysteries at once. It explains the skull's apparent technological impossibility, their lack of archaeological context, and their global dispersal, all with a single elegant, if unprovable, answer: they are survivors. Mainstream archaeology, of course, stands in firm opposition to this entire concept. There is zero geological, genetic, or archaeological evidence for a continent-sized advanced civilization in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that vanished 12,000 years ago. The academic view is that Plato's story of Atlantis was a philosophical allegory, not a historical report. From this perspective, labeling a skull Atlantean is a classic example of pseudo-history, attaching a mysterious object to an even bigger mystery to create an aura of profound significance. Yet, to dismiss the idea entirely is to miss its deeper cultural function. The Atlantean skull represents the ultimate human longing for a wiser, more harmonious ancestor. In a world of modern anxieties, the idea that we once possessed a sublime technology in balance with nature is a powerful comfort. The skull, in this light, is not evidence of Atlantis, but evidence of our own deep-seated desire for a second chance, a fragment of a better world we hope once existed and perhaps could exist again. The leap from Atlantean power sources to digital data storage is a short one in the realm of fringe science. Among the most technologically ambitious theories is the concept of the computer skull, a proposal that these artifacts are not sculptures or talismans but functional devices. Proponents argue they are ancient data storage units, perhaps even quantum computers, left behind by a civilization that mastered information technology on a crystalline level. To understand this idea, we must look at the inherent properties of quartz crystal. Quartz is piezoelectric, meaning it generates a small electrical voltage when mechanical stress is applied to it, and conversely, it vibrates at a precise frequency when an electric current passes through it. This is why quartz is used in every modern watch, computer, and smartphone to keep accurate time. The theory suggests that if quartz can be engineered to hold a steady frequency, perhaps an advanced society could engineer it to hold something far more complex like information. The speculation goes further into the realm of hypothetical crystal lattice storage. The idea is that data could be encoded at the atomic level by altering the position of atoms within the quartz crystal's rigid, repeating structure. In this vision, a skull's intricate internal lattice becomes a three-dimensional hard drive of staggering capacity, capable of holding the entire history, language, and scientific knowledge of its creators. Authors and researchers on the fringe, like those who write about ancient astronauts or lost super-civilizations, point to the skull's precise craftsmanship as evidence of this intent. They ask, why go to such extraordinary lengths to shape a skull with optical light channels and perfect symmetry, unless it was designed to function, to channel energy or information in a specific technological way? Some even claim that psychics who receive visions from the skulls are not channeling spirits, but are unconsciously downloading data from this crystalline database, their brains acting as a biological interface for a machine they do not understand. To entertain this idea is to dive into a world of breathtaking speculation, where myth becomes metaphor for a technology we are only beginning to glimpse. It transforms the skull from a silent artifact into a waiting library, its secrets locked behind an operating system we have yet to invent. The scientific consensus, however, offers a sobering and definitive reality check. Mainstream physicists and materials scientists explain that while quartz's piezoelectric property is real and useful for timing, the leap to complex data storage is not just a step but a chasm. Encoding readable, retrievable data within a crystal lattice would require the ability to deliberately place and manipulate individual atoms or electrons in a vast three-dimensional array, a feat of nanotechnology far beyond our own current capabilities. More critically, for data to be stored and remain stable over centuries, the crystal structure would need to be perfectly pure and flawless. Natural quartz, including that used in the skulls, is filled with impurities, fractures, and inclusions, which would corrupt any hypothetical data signal beyond recovery. The consensus is clear. With our current understanding of physics and material science, the crystal skulls cannot function as data storage devices or computers. They lack any internal circuitry, power source, or input-output mechanism. They are, in the strictest scientific sense, beautiful carvings, yet this overwhelming dismissal does not kill the mystery, it simply shifts its location. The power of the computer skull theory lies not in its technical plausibility, but in its profound symbolism. It reveals that when we confront an object that seems to defy its own creation, our modern minds instinctively reach for a modern explanation. In an age defined by information technology, we imagine the ultimate mystery must be a piece of that technology, lost in time. The theory is less about the skulls themselves and more about us, projecting our own technological aspirations onto the silent, stone faces of the past, hoping to find in them a reflection of our own potential, or perhaps a warning from a future we have yet to earn. Deep within the humid earth, a different kind of legend takes shape. There is a recurring story, told with slight variations across decades, of a lone adventurer stumbling upon a hidden cave entrance, perhaps concealed by a rockslide or tangled jungle roots. Inside, beyond a narrow passage, he discovers a cavern glittering not with gold but with crystal. At its center rests a single, perfect skull, sometimes flanked by smaller carvings or strange ceramic vessels. The location is always vague, often placed in the remote highlands of Mexico or the dense rainforests of Guatemala. The discoverer, overwhelmed, retrieves the skull but cannot later relocate the cave entrance, as if the earth itself has sealed the secret once more. This is the archetypal cave skull narrative, a foundational trope in the crystal skull mythos. Caves are not random backdrops in these tales, they are central characters. Across human history, from the painted caves of Lascaux to the sacred cenotes of the Maya, caves have served as portals to the underworld, places of initiation, burial, and profound ritual. They are natural temples where the boundary between the living world and the realm of ancestors or spirits feels thin. To place a crystal skull in such a setting is to imbue it with immediate primal power. It becomes an object not merely lost but deliberately hidden, guarded by geography and time. This specific narrative framework solves several problems for the legend. It explains the skull's absence from the archaeological record. No professional dig ever found it. It accounts for its pristine condition, preserved in a sterile, hidden environment. Most importantly, it provides an origin story steeped in romantic adventure, appealing directly to our love for tales of solitary discovery and forgotten worlds. The lone explorer replaces the archaeologist, intuition replaces methodical science, and a personal epiphany replaces a peer-reviewed paper. This highlights a core tension in the entire crystal skull phenomenon. These cave stories are incredibly effective at conveying a sense of wonder, but they are paralyzing for verification. A location that cannot be found is evidence that cannot be examined. The tale thrives on its own elusiveness, making the object more precious precisely because its source has vanished. The cave skull, therefore, is less a specific artifact and more a narrative blueprint. It represents our collective yearning for mysteries that remain just out of reach, for truths that are felt in the darkness of a cavern rather than catalogued in the light of a lab. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful part of a legend is not the treasure itself, but the lost map that leads to it. The lost cave gives way to a softly lit room smelling of lavender and sage. Here, the crystal skull has found a new home, not in a museum or a jungle temple, but in a modern wellness clinic. Practitioners of alternative and energy medicine sometimes incorporate these objects into their sessions, placing a skull on a client's stomach to soothe digestive turmoil, near their head to calm anxiety, or simply in the center of the room to create what they describe as a harmonizing field. In a conceptual interview, one such practitioner might explain they are not using the skull as a scalpel, but as a tuning fork. They believe the crystalline structure, especially in the resonant form of a skull, can amplify and focus intention, helping to clear energetic blockages, rebalance the body's subtle chakras, or guide a patient into a deeper, more restorative meditative state. The skull becomes a focal point for both the healer and the client, a tangible anchor for an intangible process. This practice sits at the fascinating intersection of ancient symbol and modern therapy. To understand its impact, we must seriously consider the placebo effect, which is far from a dismissive term. It is a demonstrably powerful neurobiological phenomenon where a patient's belief in a treatment triggers real, measurable physiological changes. The release of endorphins reduced inflammation, lowered stress hormones. When a client lies down in a serene environment, trusts their practitioner, and believes in the healing potential of a beautiful, mysterious object placed upon them, that belief alone can initiate a profound cascade of healing. The ritual itself is medicinal. The careful placement of the skull, the focused attention, the shared narrative of its ancient power, all serve to deepen the client's state of receptive relaxation, which is a proven foundation for healing. This does not validate the skulls as supernatural devices, but it powerfully validates the human mind and spirit. For the wellness communities that embrace them, the skull's historical origins become almost secondary. Their value is not archaeological but experiential and symbolic. They are potent physical metaphors for clarity, transformation, and the wisdom of the body. A practitioner is not selling a Mayan artifact. They are facilitating a process where the skull acts as a bridge, helping the client access their own inner resources for healing. This modern chapter reveals something profound. It shows how an object shrouded in the mystery of the past can be repurposed as a tool for addressing very contemporary ailments: stress, disconnection, spiritual yearning. The skull's power in this context is undeniably real because it is a power co-created by belief, ritual, and the timeless human capacity for self-renewal when offered a compelling symbol of hope. That gentle hum of healing energy finds a startling echo in a more literal, physical claim. Among the many legends, one stands out for its sensory immediacy: the story of the singing skull. Certain accounts, often from private collectors or during public exhibitions, describe a faint, audible hum emanating from a crystal skull. This is not a psychic impression, but a reported physical sound, a low vibration that can sometimes be felt through the fingertips when the skull is touched, or heard in a quiet room under specific atmospheric conditions, like changes in humidity or barometric pressure. To understand if this is even possible, we must listen to the stone itself. Quartz crystal is not just a pretty rock, it is a naturally resonant material. Its piezoelectric property means it can convert mechanical energy into electrical energy and vice versa. This is precisely why a tiny, precisely cut sliver of quartz is the heart of every modern watch and computer clock, vibrating at an exact, unwavering frequency to keep perfect time. So the idea that a large, solid block of carved quartz could vibrate is not mystical. It is grounded in basic physics. The real question is whether the unique shape of a human skull could amplify or tune that vibration in a way that becomes audible. Think of it as a natural sound chamber. The hollowed interior, the sinus cavities, the eye sockets, all of these features could, in theory, affect how sound waves move and resonate within the crystal. A skilled carver, whether ancient or modern, might unconsciously or deliberately shape the skull in a way that creates specific acoustic properties, much like a master luthier shapes a violin body to produce a rich tone. There have been sporadic attempts to capture this phenomenon. In informal settings, people have placed sensitive microphones near skulls, sometimes reporting faint harmonic frequencies or changes in ambient sound. More structured tests are rare, but the concept invites a fascinating experiment. Using laser vibrometry, a technology that measures microscopic surface vibrations with a beam of light, scientists could scan a skull to see if it naturally resonates at certain frequencies, perhaps in response to ambient room sounds, subsonic vibrations from traffic, or even the electrical hum of the power grid. Such a test could separate measurable physics from imaginative hearing. This acoustic attribute forms a crucial bridge between the physical and the metaphysical. In spiritual practices, everything is said to have a vibration, a frequency. The concept of healing with sound or using specific tones to alter consciousness is ancient and widespread. If a crystal skull were found to naturally resonate at a specific, stable frequency, it would provide a tangible, scientific hook for many of the intangible experiences people report, feelings of calm, mental clarity, or emotional shift. The hum would not be a magical voice, but a physical pulse, a literal vibration that could, theoretically, influence the human nervous system, which is itself an exquisite network of electrical impulses. So, is the singing skull a myth? Perhaps not entirely. It may be the faintest whisper of a natural phenomenon where the right crystal, carved into the right shape under the right conditions, becomes more than a sculpture. It becomes a silent bell waiting for the perfect moment to ring, reminding us that the line between a physical object and an energetic instrument might be thinner and far more resonant than we ever suspected. The hollow gaze of a crystal skull is often described as its most unsettling feature. Among the more chilling legends are those of skulls whose empty eye sockets seem to track your movement, following you silently around a room. Some stories go further, suggesting certain skulls contain hidden mechanisms, tiny crystal lenses that can shift or rotate within the orbits, creating an uncanny impression of a living, watching intelligence. These tales frequently swirl around the most famous specimen, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, with viewers reporting an eerie sensation of being observed by the flawless quartz face. To understand this phenomenon, we must look at the interplay of light, crystal, and our own hardwired perception. A masterfully carved crystal skull is not a solid block, it is a complex lens. Light entering its form does not simply pass through, it bends, refracts, and scatters. The curved interior surfaces of the eye sockets, the polished planes of the cheekbones, and the precise angles of the cranial facets all act as prisms. As you move around the skull, the pattern of light and shadow within those hollow eyes changes dynamically. A bright highlight might glide across the back of the socket, creating the illusion that a pupil has shifted to maintain its lock on you. This is not a supernatural event, but a breathtaking feat of natural optics, an unintended consequence of carving a human form from a transparent, light-bending material. Our own psychology then takes this simple trick of the light and amplifies it into something profoundly personal. Humans possess an instinct called pareidolia, the tendency to see meaningful patterns, especially faces, in random stimuli. We see the man in the moon, the Virgin Mary in a toast, and without conscious effort, we imbue the simple arrangement of two eyes and a nose with sentience and attention. When that arrangement is carved in 3 dimensions from a material that plays with light, the effect is overpowering. Our brain screams that something is looking back because for millions of years, recognizing a face looking at us has been a matter of survival, signaling either threat or connection. This deep-seated bias explains why we might feel a shiver when standing before a crystal skull, while a similarly carved crystal bowl would leave us unmoved. The skull taps into our most primal social hardware. Separating the supernatural fear from the explainable phenomenon does not diminish the experience, it enriches it. The moving eyes are not evidence of a ghost in the machine, but proof of the artifact's sublime craftsmanship interacting with the ancient software of the human mind. It feels alive because we are programmed to see life in that specific form. This reveals a core truth of the entire mystery. The most powerful magic wielded by these objects may not reside in the crystal at all, but in the mesmerized brain of the person who stands before it, forever caught in its silent, watchful gaze. This persistent sensation of being watched by a silent crystal face leads some to wonder if the connection runs even deeper than light and psychology. What if the skulls are not just being observed, but are themselves observing, recording, and even communicating with one another? This brings us to one of the most expansive and ambitious ideas in the entire mystery, the theory of a collective consciousness network. Proponents of this view propose that the authentic ancient skulls are not isolated masterpieces, but individual nodes in a vast, dormant system. They believe each skull holds a fragment of a greater whole, like pieces of a scattered crystal radio, and that when all the true skulls are finally reunited, they will activate. This activation, the theory goes, would not be a dramatic light show, but a subtle, psychic event, unlocking a flood of hidden knowledge, elevating human awareness, or restoring a lost harmony to the planet. It frames the global search for these artifacts not as a hobby for collectors, but as a sacred mission with a deadline, a planetary puzzle we are meant to solve before a coming era of change. The roots of this idea are deeply entwined with 20th century spiritualism and channeled prophecy. In the mid-1980s, a pair of crystal skulls known as Max and Sha-Na-Ra were brought together for a series of experiments by researchers. The individuals present reported strong energy fields and intuitive impressions that the skulls were interacting, exchanging information. These events were documented in popular books, which served as a catalyst, spreading the network theory from small circles into the broader New Age movement. The concept was powerfully appealing because it gave a grand, unified purpose to the growing number of skulls appearing in private hands. It suggested that every discovery was not random, but part of a deliberate cosmic plan. This belief has manifested in very tangible, real-world gatherings. For decades, enthusiasts and caretakers have organized crystal skull conferences and meditation circles. At these events, people bring their skulls, from the famous to the family heirloom, and place them together on a central altar. The goal is not scientific comparison, but energetic communion. Participants sit in silent meditation, hoping to facilitate a connection between the artifacts, to help them sync up, as they say, and amplify a healing or enlightening frequency for all in attendance. Witnesses describe a palpable shift in the room's atmosphere, a thickening of the air, a collective sense of peace or heightened intuition. Whether this is a mass psychological event or something more, the practice is a living ritual born directly from the network theory. It transforms the skulls from passive objects into active participants in a modern ceremony. This theory ultimately solves a nagging problem within the legend. If these are just random carvings, why are there so many stories, and why do they captivate us so deeply? The network idea provides an answer because we sense on some subconscious level that they belong together. They are components of a machine we have forgotten how to operate, a technology of consciousness waiting for the right moment to reboot. It gives every alleged discovery, every dusty artifact in a museum case, a potential role in a story far bigger than itself. The search for the 25 skulls becomes a quest to reassemble a key, not knowing what door it might unlock, but feeling with unwavering conviction that the door is there. The ability to separate a genuine artifact from a modern masterpiece is where mystery becomes a science of its own. After exploring the stories of so many skulls, from museum collections to private altars, a pattern of clues begins to emerge. These are the forensic fingerprints left by the tools that shape the crystal, and they tell a story more reliable than any legend. The first and most telling sign is the mark of the rotary wheel. Look at a crystal skull under strong magnification, and you might see something very specific. On the flat planes of the cheeks, the forehead, or inside the eye sockets, you will often find a series of fine, perfectly parallel grooves. These are not random scratches, they are the uniform, curved striations left by a diamond-tipped blade or drill bit spinning at a constant high speed. This is the signature of 19th or 20th century lapidary technology, a tool that rotates with mechanical precision. An ancient carver using a hand-held reed or bow drill with sand and water as an abrasive would create a very different pattern. The marks would be more erratic, less uniform, because the human hand cannot maintain that perfect machine-like rotation. The pressure would vary, the sand would shift, leaving a surface that, under magnification, looks more like a gently worn stone than a machine part. Next, examine the symmetry. A skull carved with modern rotary tools will often exhibit a level of perfect mirror-image balance that is incredibly difficult to achieve by hand. The eye sockets will be identical in size and depth, the cheekbones will match exactly, the teeth will be uniform. This perfection is a red flag. Ancient artisans, even the most skilled, worked by eye and feel. While they aimed for symmetry, slight variations are always present, a subtle asymmetry that reveals the human touch. A perfectly symmetrical skull suggests the use of a template and a tool that could replicate that template with inhuman consistency. Finally, consider the material itself. Where did the crystal come from? Large, flawless blocks of clear quartz or amethyst are not found everywhere. If a skull is said to be from a specific ancient culture, like the Maya of Guatemala, but is made from a type of quartz that only occurs in deposits in Brazil, that is a major problem. Ancient cultures typically used locally available materials. Transporting a multi-hundred-pound block of flawless crystal across thousands of miles without modern machinery is a story in itself, and one rarely supported by evidence. These three clues, the parallel grooves, the perfect symmetry, and the non-local stone, form a simple but powerful toolkit. They allow you to look past the story and see the object for what it truly is, a physical record of its own creation. This forensic lens does not rob the skulls of their beauty or their cultural power, but it grounds the mystery in the tangible world of physics, geology, and human ingenuity. It reminds us that every object, no matter how enigmatic, carries the indelible signature of the hands that made it. That forensic signature of the carver's tool is a story written in stone, but it cannot explain the story written in our hearts. Why do these objects, regardless of their verified age, hold such an unshakable grip on our imagination? The answer lies in a perfect and profound collision of symbols. First, consider the human skull itself. Across every culture and every epoch, it is the ultimate memento mori, a stark reminder of our own inevitable mortality. Yet it is also so much more. It is the bony vessel that houses the mind, the seat of consciousness, wisdom, and the self. In one silent form, it encapsulates the entire human journey from the spark of thought to the finality of dust. It represents both our limits and our limitless potential. Now fuse that with the substance of crystal. Crystal, especially clear quartz, is seen as the opposite of decay. It is eternal, unchanging, formed under immense pressure over eons. It is cold, hard fact, but it also bends light, creating rainbows and illusions. Throughout history, crystals have been attributed with mystical properties, from storing energy to focusing thought to bridging the physical and spiritual worlds. So when you combine these two icons, you create an object of breathtaking contradiction. It is mortality rendered in a material that seems immortal. It is the seat of the mind carved from a substance believed to amplify thought. This fusion creates a resonant tension that is almost impossible to ignore. The crystal skull becomes a philosophical riddle you can hold in your hands, asking us what it means to be a conscious being in a temporary body. This deep symbolic power was then supercharged by the engines of 20th century popular culture. Long before they were subjects of serious archaeological debate, crystal skulls were props in pulp adventure magazines and dime store novels. They were the treasures of lost cities, the keys to alien vaults, the cursed possessions of mad priests. This genre established the skulls not as artifacts but as plot devices, synonymous with danger, discovery, and ancient secrets. Then Hollywood cemented the image forever. Films like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did not invent the legend, they baptized it in the mainstream. By placing a crystal skull at the center of a globe-trotting adventure led by the world's most beloved archaeologist, the movie validated the entire mythology for millions. It told the audience in the most entertaining way possible that this was a mystery worth chasing. Simultaneously, the burgeoning New Age movement of the late 20th century provided a spiritual home for the skulls. In a time of seeking alternative spirituality and hidden histories, the crystal skull was a ready-made sacred object. It fit perfectly into narratives of Atlantis, Lemuria, psychic channeling, and earth energies. It became a tangible focus for meditation, a tool for healing, a symbol of a lost, harmonious past we yearn to reclaim. These three streams, pulp adventure, blockbuster cinema, and spiritual seeking, flowed together into a powerful river of modern folklore. The crystal skull stopped being just an object and became an idea, a blank screen onto which we could project our fears about death, our hopes for hidden knowledge, and our nostalgia for a world filled with unexplored corners. They are a perfect storm where ancient symbolism meets timeless human longing, all amplified by the megaphone of contemporary storytelling. Their true power isn't in where they came from, but in what they allow us to wonder about ourselves. But the 25 skulls we have named are only the beginning of the census. For every one displayed in a museum or documented in a collection, there are whispers of others, phantoms in the crystal record. These are the unfound skulls, the rumors that keep the hunt alive. Some are said to be locked away in the vaults of reclusive private collectors, acquired decades ago and never shown to the public. Others might be mislabeled curiosities, sitting forgotten in the basement storage of a small regional museum, catalogued simply as a quartz carving with no understanding of its place in this larger puzzle. And then there are the ones that have never felt the touch of a modern hand at all. They remain where they have rested for centuries, perhaps buried in an undiscovered tomb beneath the roots of a jungle tree, or sealed within a cave system whose entrance collapsed long ago. This final entry in our list is not an object but a possibility. It is the skull number 25, the one that has not yet been counted. The most tantalizing question is this: could a genuinely ancient pre-Columbian crystal skull still be waiting to be found? From a purely statistical standpoint, given the vast, unexplored regions of Mesoamerica and the countless unexcavated sites, it is not impossible. If such an artifact were to emerge, its authentication would need to be ironclad, a multidisciplinary inquest. It could not come from a looter's hole or a collector's living room. It would need to be discovered in a pristine, documented archaeological context, sealed under layers of datable soil, alongside pottery, tools, or other artifacts that firmly anchor it to a specific culture and century. The skull itself would then undergo a forensic symphony of tests. Isotopic analysis could fingerprint the precise geological source of its quartz, tracing it to a specific mine or region. Advanced microscopy would search for tool marks, not just on the surface but deep within the carving strokes, looking for the distinctive, multidirectional abrasion of hand-powered sand and water, utterly absent of the parallel grooves of a rotary wheel. Most importantly, it would need to show the subtle wear patterns of centuries, microfractures, and a patina of age that cannot be artificially replicated. This is the scientific gold standard, the discovery that could silence skeptics and rewrite textbooks. Yet we need not wait for a new dig to advance the mystery. The skulls we already have hold secrets that new technologies are poised to reveal. Imagine subjecting the Mitchell Hedges or the British Museum skull to high-resolution 3D scanning, not just of its exterior, but using techniques like micro-CT scanning to map its internal crystalline structure in perfect detail. We could see every flaw, every inclusion, every microscopic fracture line with perfect clarity, creating a digital twin that allows researchers across the globe to study the object without ever touching it. We could run simulations testing how light actually travels through its specific geometry to create the famous glowing eyes. Isotopic analysis could be applied to these known skulls as well, definitively proving whether their quartz came from Brazil, Madagascar, or the Alps, severing any false link to Mesoamerican soil. Each new technological lens adds a layer of data, chipping away at the ambiguity. The story of the crystal skulls, therefore, is not a closed book gathering dust on a shelf. It is a living document with blank pages at the end. The hunt continues in museum archives, in jungle clearings, and in university laboratories. The next chapter could be written by an archaeologist's trowel striking crystal in a sealed chamber, or by a laser revealing a telltale isotope ratio on a long-studied artifact. One discovery, one definitive piece of evidence, could collapse a century of speculation into a single, undeniable fact. And so the legend endures, not because it has been solved, but precisely because it hasn't. The 25th skull is out there, in the earth or in the data, waiting to be found. And with it, perhaps, a final answer to the question that has haunted us all along. Were our ancestors far greater than we ever believed, or have we, for generations, been telling ourselves a story so beautiful we desperately needed it to be true? From the legendary Mitchell Hedges to the controversial Smithsonian specimen, our journey has spanned continents and centuries. We have stood in silent museum galleries and crowded meditation circles, listened to the hum of electron microscopes and the whispers of channelers. The weight of the evidence, etched in parallel grooves and isotopic signatures, leans decisively toward a modern origin for most of these famed crystal skulls. They appear to be breathtaking products of the 19th and 20th centuries, born from a potent mix of skilled lapidary art, a booming antiquities market, and the human hunger for the exotic. Yet, to declare the case closed here is to miss the entire point of their enduring fascination. The true power of these objects was never confined to a carbon date. It lives in the electric space between what they are and what we need them to be. They are mirrors reflecting back our deepest curiosities. For the scientist, they are a puzzle of tool marks and material science. For the historian, they are a lesson in how legends are manufactured and spread. For the spiritual seeker, they are vessels of energy and gateways to hidden wisdom. And for the storyteller in all of us, they are perfect engines of mystery, crystallizing our longing for a world where ancient secrets still lie waiting in the dark. This is why they captivate us. They exist at the crossroads of fact and faith, of archaeology and aspiration. They remind us that history is not a sterile list of verified events. It is a living, breathing narrative shaped by the stories we choose to believe and the mysteries we are brave enough to chase. The crystal skulls challenge us to ask which is more real, the provable origin of an object, or the profound and undeniable effect it has on the human heart and mind. Their legacy is not carved in quartz, but in the endless debate they inspire. So we leave you with the question that has echoed through this entire exploration. In your view, are these skulls ancient artifacts carrying lost truths, masterful modern forgeries born from commerce and creativity? Or are they something else entirely, a third category that belongs to the realm of symbol and story? The comment section is yours, a digital campfire for sharing theories, doubts, and wonders. And if you're drawn to the shadows where history meets mystery, be sure to subscribe. Our next deep dive into the world's greatest enigmas is already waiting. Thank you for watching.